The narcissist's greatest fear isn't losing you. It's discovering that they can no longer control what you feel, what you think, or what you do. And the moment you stop reacting the way they expect, something inside their carefully constructed world begins to crack. Carl Jung understood that what we refuse to confront within ourselves does not simply disappear. It hides in the shadow, waiting to surface when the identity we built is threatened. And this is where things become disturbing. A narcissistic person may spend years building an image of superiority, certainty, and control, but that image becomes harder to maintain when the person they once influenced stops feeding it. You stop defending yourself, you stop explaining, you stop chasing. You stop reacting to the silence, the provocations, the sudden distance, and suddenly the buttons they spent so long learning how to push stop working. At first, they may assume you're bluffing. They may withdraw, provoke you, or test whether they can still pull an emotional reaction out of you. But when nothing comes back, the dynamic changes, because now they're facing something they never prepared for, a person who sees the pattern and refuses to participate in it. And this is where the illusion of control begins to collapse. Not necessarily in some dramatic explosion, but in something far more threatening to them. The realization that their old strategies no longer produce the same result. And once that realization takes hold, the next thing they may do can reveal just how dependent that sense of power really was. Control is the oxygen of the narcissistic dynamic. Not necessarily control over where you go or who you speak to, but something far more intimate, control over your emotional state. If they withdraw and you panic, they learn that silence works. If they provoke you and you explode, they learn exactly where your wounds are. If they threaten to leave and you beg them to stay, they discover how much fear they can activate inside you. Over time, your reactions can become predictable, and predictability creates leverage. This is why the narcissist can appear almost unnaturally calm while you're falling apart. They may not be calmer than you at all. They may simply feel secure because the dynamic is producing the result they expected. Your confusion becomes evidence that they still matter. Your anger proves they can still reach you. Your desperation confirms that the emotional connection remains under their influence. But then something changes. You begin noticing the pattern. The silence no longer feels mysterious. The provocation becomes obvious. The threat of abandonment stops terrifying you. And instead of giving them the emotional explosion they expected, you give them something they cannot easily manipulate. Nothing. No argument, no desperate explanation, no performance, just distance. And that is when the illusion starts breaking, because control only feels powerful while the other person continues responding to it. Once the reaction disappears, the narcissist is forced to confront a question they desperately wanted to avoid. If they can no longer control your emotions, how much power did they ever really have? And what happens next is where their behavior can become far more revealing. The moment you stop reacting is the moment the entire dynamic begins to change. At first, they may not believe it. They may assume your silence is temporary, that eventually you'll break, send the message, demand an explanation, or return to the role they became accustomed to. So they test you. A sudden cold message, a provocative comment, an unexpected appearance on social media, perhaps even a carefully timed reminder of the past. The method can change, but the question underneath it remains the same. Can I still get inside your head? And when you refuse to give them the reaction they expected, the old pattern starts failing. This is where your silence becomes more powerful than any argument you could have made. Not because silence magically destroys a narcissist, but because it removes the feedback that once made the manipulation effective. They can accuse you, but you no longer rush to defend yourself. They can withdraw, but you no longer chase. They can try to make you jealous, but you no longer compete. They can rewrite the past, but you no longer need their version of reality to validate your own. Every failed attempt reveals the same uncomfortable truth. The emotional access they once had is disappearing. And when someone has built part of their sense of power around being able to provoke, influence, or destabilize another person, losing that access can feel deeply threatening. This is where the mask of indifference may begin to slip. Not necessarily through tears or confession, but through escalation, contradiction, sudden attention, or attempts to regain relevance. Because underneath all of those behaviors lies one terrifying possibility. You are learning how to live without their control. And once they understand that, the wound underneath the performance begins to surface. If you're beginning to recognize this pattern in someone you've dealt with, subscribe to The Inner Shadow, because what comes next is where the psychology gets even darker. And if this video is helping you understand something you struggled to put into words, leave a like. It helps YouTube show this content to other people who may still be trapped inside the same cycle. Share this video with someone who needs to see what happens when manipulation finally stops working. Because losing your reaction is only the beginning. When the narcissist realizes the old buttons no longer work, they may search for another way back into your mind. And that is when the wound beneath their need for control becomes impossible to ignore. This is where the real battle begins, because beneath the need for control is something far more fragile than the narcissist wants anyone to see. Carl Jung believed that the parts of ourselves we cannot accept are pushed into the shadow, where they continue influencing our behavior from beneath conscious awareness. For someone with strong narcissistic patterns, losing control can threaten the identity they have worked desperately to protect. The superiority, the certainty, the coldness, the appearance that nothing affects them, these can become armor around vulnerabilities they refuse to confront, and you were once part of that armor. Every time you chased them, doubted yourself, begged for clarity, or reacted to their provocations, the dynamic reinforced their sense of importance. But now the mirror has changed. You are no longer reflecting the powerful version of themselves they wanted to see. Your indifference reflects something much harder to tolerate, their inability to control you. This is why losing emotional access can provoke such intense attempts to restore the old dynamic. They may suddenly become charming again. They may become colder. They may disappear completely and return when you least expect it. They may try jealousy, guilt, nostalgia, anger, or even apparent vulnerability. Different weapons, same objective. They are searching for the reaction that proves they still matter inside your mind. But when every weapon hits silence, they are left facing the one person they spent years trying to escape, themselves. And that is when the desperate attempts to regain control can truly begin. When the old methods stop working, the narcissist may not simply walk away. They may change the weapon. Silence failed, so they suddenly become interested again. Jealousy failed, so they manufacture a crisis. Anger failed, so they become vulnerable. Distance failed, so they return with memories, apologies, promises, or a version of themselves you desperately wanted to see months ago. This is what makes the cycle so dangerous. The strategy can change so dramatically that you mistake a new tactic for a new person. But watch what happens when you refuse to move, when the nostalgic message gets no response, when the carefully placed social media post doesn't make you jealous, when the guilt no longer makes you explain yourself, when their sudden affection doesn't erase what you already learned. The narcissist is confronted with something increasingly difficult to deny. The old version of you is gone, and that can trigger escalation. They may push harder, disappear again, rewrite the story, portray themselves as the victim, or search for validation somewhere else. Not every narcissistic person will react the same way, but the underlying dynamic is crucial. Manipulation loses its force when it can no longer reliably produce an emotional response, and this is where your absence becomes more threatening than your anger ever was. Anger still creates engagement. Hatred still keeps them psychologically relevant. Endless arguments still give them access, but genuine detachment gives them nothing to work with. No emotional fuel, no predictable reaction, no proof that they can still pull you back into the cycle. And when every attempt fails, they eventually reach the point they were desperately trying to avoid, the realization that control isn't slipping anymore. It may already be gone, and then comes the moment they never expected. Nothing works anymore. The silence that once made you panic now gives you peace. The jealousy that once consumed you now looks painfully obvious. The accusations that once forced you to defend yourself now sound like noise. Even their sudden affection loses its power because you finally understand the pattern behind it. This is where the narcissist may confront the collapse of something far more important than the relationship itself. The belief that they still have access to you. They can replace attention. They can search for validation somewhere else. They can construct another story in which they were the victim and you were the problem. But what they cannot easily recreate is the exact dynamic they once had with someone who has now seen through it. And that realization can be brutal, because you are no longer fighting to expose them. You are no longer begging them to understand your pain. You are no longer trying to win. You simply stopped playing. That is what makes genuine detachment so powerful. The narcissist can fight anger. They can manipulate guilt. They can exploit hope. But they cannot control someone who no longer needs anything from them. And when they finally understand that your silence isn't punishment, that your distance isn't a strategy, and that you're genuinely moving forward without them, the illusion begins to collapse completely. Because now there is no enemy to defeat, no argument to win, no emotional reaction to extract. There is only the reality they tried desperately to avoid. They lost access to you. And what happens when that reality finally sinks in reveals the darkest weakness behind their need for power. This is the point where the illusion finally begins to die. Not necessarily the narcissist, not necessarily their entire life. The illusion, the belief that they could disappear and you would wait, that they could return and you would open the door, that one message could still destroy your peace. That one accusation could still make you question yourself. That one glimpse of them with someone else could still tear you apart. But now they are confronted with a reality they never expected. The version of you they knew how to control no longer exists. And this is where Carl Jung's concept of the shadow becomes especially revealing. When an identity depends on denying weakness, rejection can force those buried feelings closer to the surface. Shame, insecurity, emptiness, fear of insignificance. The emotions hidden beneath the performance do not magically disappear simply because the narcissist refuses to acknowledge them. And when you stop carrying those emotions for them, when you stop accepting the blame, absorbing the chaos, and reacting to every provocation, they may be left with feelings they spent years projecting outward. This is the real collapse that matters. The collapse of the fantasy that they still own a place inside your mind. They may find another source of validation. They may pretend you meant nothing. They may construct a new story where they won and you lost. But none of that changes what has happened between you. The old dynamic is dead, and the most devastating part is that you didn't destroy it by attacking them. You destroyed it by becoming unreachable to the manipulation. No revenge, no final confrontation, no dramatic victory. You simply stopped giving their behavior the power to define your emotional reality. And once that happens, there is one final truth about narcissistic control that changes the entire story. And here is the final truth. The narcissist's greatest loss was never simply losing the relationship. It was losing the version of you they could predict, the version that reacted, the version that chased, the version that questioned its own reality every time they twisted the truth. That person gave them something incredibly powerful: access. Access to your attention, access to your emotions, access to the deepest wounds they learned how to activate. But once you see the pattern clearly, something irreversible begins to happen. You stop asking why they treated you this way and start asking why you tolerated it for so long. You stop waiting for their apology and start building a life that doesn't require one. You stop fantasizing about the day they finally understand your value because you finally understand it yourself, and that is where their control ends. Carl Jung warned that until we make the unconscious conscious, it can direct our lives while we mistake it for fate. That is the real escape. You recognize the pattern, you confront the wound that kept you attached to it, and you refuse to repeat it. The narcissist may move on. They may find someone else. They may tell everyone they never cared. They may even convince themselves that they won. Let them, because while they are protecting the same illusion, you are becoming someone that illusion can no longer reach. You don't need to destroy the narcissist. You don't need revenge. You don't even need them to regret losing you. Their consequences belong to them. Your freedom belongs to you. And perhaps that is the most devastating loss of control of all. One day they reach for the person they once knew exactly how to manipulate and discover that person no longer exists.